Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are on this beautiful planet. My name is Katana Malinowski, and I am the host of Transformational Art with Katana, making the unmanageable manageable. Welcome. Today, I have with me Dr. Jamil Sayegh, life, business, and relationship coach. Welcome, Jamil. It is wonderful to have you here today.
Thank you so much, Kitana. Wonderful to be with you and with your audience.
Thank you so much. Well, today is an opportunity for us to get to know about you and the different transformations you've been through and have helped contribute to bringing about. So my first question that I'm going to ask you is, who is Jamil Sayegh as a person?
Mm. Beautiful. So let's see. Who am I as a person? So I'm going to answer this in maybe an unconventional way, but who I am as a person is who I decide to be in this moment, regardless of anything that's occurred up until now. Who I am is, from my perspective, an individuation of divinity, just like I believe everyone else is. And who I am as I choose to be, I choose to be somebody who fiercely loves, lives, and enjoys life to the greatest capacity that I can.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, when you brought up the divinity, you made me think of the book "I Am the Word" by Paul Selig.
I think you showed that to me in one of our conversations in the past. Yeah.
Yes, about we are all divine beings having a human experience. And I
Mm-hmm.
believe that it was because you had said that in our conversation that made me think of that. And I think it's a really nice spiritual, you know, awareness that we have that energy within each one of us. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. If I may add one thing,
Sure.
and this kind of goes with the first thing I said, that I am who I choose to be in this moment.
Mm-hmm.
That's not just a me thing, we can all do that. And I share it because I shared this yesterday with some friends of mine, this idea that one of the traps I think we fall into so often is the myth of personality. And we think that I am my personality, as if personality is a static thing that's unchanging. And then when we say, well, this is who I am, that's just the way that it is, I've always been this way, then we're going to continue living out this kind of self-inflicted narrative that we made up, that other people kind of participated in the creation of, but we're continuing it, right? And so, who am I? I could have said, oh, medicine and coaching and this and this and this, but that's like what I do. It's not who I am. And so for everyone listening, when we can just detach from those stories we've been telling that don't serve us, and we really get clear, who am I? Like, actually, who's under what's that animating force under the hood? And I think it just changes so much of how we relate to our life and to the world.
Thank you. Yes. And that is one of the things that I have been exploring more and more over the past year, is really getting down to the clarity of who I am. And it was how I did find my purpose of transformational art and wellness and helping people in that way, because I had already been helping people. And so when I took the time to get out of my head really and start feeling who I was and going, what is it that lights me up, and what is it that makes me feel dark, and those connections to that divine space that's within us. I'm very much about spirituality, very in unconventional ways, but I still embrace the tolerance of each way that people want to bring that about in their life.
Yeah. And like when you said, what is it? I'm paraphrasing this, but what is it that lights me up? And what is it that makes me feel, bad, let's say? And as you've heard me share before, like one of my top 3 favorite words is enthusiasm, which comes from ante theos or en theos, and it means the God within.
Mm.
And so, at least from the way I see things, that this divine spark that each of us is, you being that, you radiating that into the world, you being enthusiastic, right, about whatever it is that you love,
Yes.
what lights you up, that is your unique fingerprint in this world. That's what makes you you. That's why you being you, living a successful life on your terms. Like I define success as I'm really happy with my life and I love my life. And like, is that you? And if it is, and you're living the life that you believe you should be living, then you're that antetheos, that enthusiasm, you're radiating that, and that's you being you. And so yeah, I'll pause there because I feel like I can go into a tangent and we're just getting started.
Well, actually, that was leading me into the next question, which is what does make you happy?
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting. The way the question is worded. So there's gonna be a lot of unconventional answers, I think, here. What makes me happy is me.
Mm,
And when I recognize that, I used to think when I was younger that external things could make me happy. And it would be, acquiring something that I've wanted for a long time or whatever that might be. And I had this realization one time that, there are people who have everything I could ever imagine physically having,
mhm.
and some of them are really miserable.
Yeah.
And there's people who have like none of the things that I have now, and some of them are really happy.
Yes.
And so it's interesting that maybe happiness has nothing to do with any of that, right? And so on like a deeper side of things, it's like I make me happy. But on the more like kind of general idea of it, I really I love laughing. I love enjoying myself. I love spending time with people and getting to know them, especially if I can contribute and serve them in any way.
Mhm.
When anyone who's listening to this, that's in a way, we're all in the service, business.
Yes.
But when somebody tells you an impact that you had on their life that was really positive for them, that just touches my heart and my spirit in a way that, nothing else really does. Definitely love being in nature. And so whether it's hiking, I spent 5 years in Arizona when I was in medical school there, and just getting to hike. I never hiked a day in my life in New York. And so when I went to Arizona, I got thrown into some of the biggest mountains in the Southwest, and it was so beautiful. And I got into really great shape, and I got to fall in love with, the challenge of climbing like a 10 or 12,000 foot mountain over the course of a whole day. And then you're seeing the views and you're seeing the progress, and it's really good. And so, friends, family, enjoying myself and growing and loving, like that's what lights me up.
Wow, that's beautiful. And I love the imagery that brings up when you were talking about climbing those mountains,
Mm,
because not only in the work that we do where we're helping people transform. So it's in essence, it's like climbing a mountain, you're going up there, but you're helping people bring themselves along. So they're already at the top of the mountain, but you're showing them how to see for themselves that path that they themselves can light up. But I was also thinking about the ways that you see everything that's out there that's
mm.
yet to be seen.
Oh yeah.
And it's so amazing. I used to live in Reno, Nevada, and so I've traveled around Nevada quite a bit, and it's the same way. It's very open. And when you're atop a mountain and you can just see that foreverness, it's just incredible. So
Yeah. And you're going with that, something that came to my mind in the 5 years I spent in Arizona, I was very fortunate to get to travel around the state. I didn't go everywhere, but I went to a lot of the places that I would have wanted to go. I went to the Grand Canyon twice. I lived in Tempe, which was around Phoenix, and I got to go to Sedona and Flagstaff and all these different areas that anyone who knows the area is somewhat probably familiar with. And I got to camp and we got to hike and we got to explore and we got to go on all these adventures. And not only I made friends for a lifetime, but like the growth, the experience, the newness when you expand, when your awareness expands as to what's really out there. Intellectually, I knew the Grand Canyon was there, but getting to actually be there and getting to see it And people say, oh yeah, the photos don't do it justice. It's like, yeah, they're right. Like my eyes, like it was amazing, like how expensive it was. But stuff like that, that newness. I often tell people who tell me that they're bored, or they'll say life is boring.
Mhm.
And with respect, they'll say, it's not that life is boring, it's that you're being boring.
Ooh, good point.
It's how you're choosing to, you might not be doing it consciously, but how you're
Right.
choosing to show up, how you're choosing to relate to life. I could sit in my apartment in Arizona back in the day and just sit there and say, I'm bored. There's an infinite number of things around me to do that could be amazing. I'm just not choosing them. And so, yeah, it's fascinating, but expansion is, to me, a beautiful thing that creates a lot of happiness.
And you said a key word there, choices. We always have the choices to move ourselves forward, stay stuck, or even go backwards at times.
Yes. Yeah, yeah.
With that being said, in the converse, part of this question is, what makes you sad or angry?
Mm. I think that that answer has definitely changed over the years. I think that I used to, this still happens from time to time, but anger and sadness don't happen as much anymore,
Mhm.
but they used to happen somewhat frequently. And I used to get, like anyone, get triggered fairly often. And I did a lot of work on myself to be with the present moment and be with what's occurring and not be in resistance to it. And when I'm not in resistance to what's happening, when I can come from a space of, as a possibility, what if, as tragic or challenging as this moment seems, what if it could be happening for me? What if that, when I look back in my life right now in hindsight, and I can see that some of the most challenging moments of my life are the exact reason why I'm able to do all the things that I do right now that I love so much. Once I shifted in that way of being and that perspective, it was very rare for moments to really get me angry or sad. But again, when they do happen, I would say it's when I forget everything I just said. And when I forget those things, it'd be more frustration than anger. And it might be that there's people that I really care about in this world that I know personally that I can see are doing things that don't serve them and doing things that are maybe even injuring them in
Mm.
many respects,
Yeah.
and or potentially are going to lead to something pretty nasty, but it's one of those things that you don't see it in the short term.
Right.
And I can't predict the future, it might not, but it's likely that it will. And so I do what I can to share perspectives with them and to attempt to help them not go down that path that I've seen it over and over again not work out for people.
Yes.
And when they don't take the advice, when they don't listen, that's something that years ago really bothered me, because I was coming from what I thought was such a loving place,
Yeah.
and they weren't, taking that, perspective. But as I got older and as I really reflected on it, it's like, it's their life. They don't need to take that perspective. And if they want to, great. And if they don't, I'll continue to, as much as I can in the non-annoying way, offer it and leave the door open for them to walk through if and when they choose to. But yeah, ultimately I really care. And because I really care, when I shift from that spirit place to more of an ego place,
Mhm.
I sometimes can think that my way is the right way versus my way is just a
Oh,
way. And so when I come from my way is the right way, I can get frustrated with people and sad when something happens that I thought I could have prevented if they had only listened. But that's just a story that, I run in my head. And so at the end of the day, that's pretty much what gets me to those points.
oh, that's brilliance. Because it is really a perspective, and what we perceive to be advice, someone will, oftentimes hear as not as advice or, concern, because I think that's really what I was picking up on what you were saying is you're coming from a place of concern, genuine love, care, and concern. And but they're hearing it as being bossy, as being pushy, as being, you know, don't give me advice. You don't know what you're talking about. I know what I'm doing. Why do I say this? Because I've been there at different points
Yeah.
in my life, especially when I was younger. Oh, I know what I'm doing. I'm invincible. I can do these things. It's okay. And
And
of course, I know better now.
yeah, and if I can add, one of the insights that I came to in my own reflections was, am I really coming from a place of love? And I sat there when I dove into it, I said, wow, there is obviously concern in what I am saying is love, but there's also, I'm coming from fear. And I'm coming from the space of, whether it was a family member or someone that I really just knew intimately, hey, um, it's essentially, it's like, if you don't do this, if you don't act this way on a consistent basis, A, B, and C might happen. For me, it was always, I got into health when I was very young. And so I became this like health fanatic when I was 14. And I wanted to like take care of everybody that I knew. Right. And I had this like perspective from 14 to like 20 of just like, my way is the way. Like, I know like how to make you healthy. Right. And that's, it came from, I think it came from a good place, but at the same time, there was definitely fear. There was this underlying fear of, if you don't do these things, maybe you get sick, maybe this happens, maybe that happens, maybe you die. And it was like me trying to prevent that from happening. Right.
Right.
But going with what we said in the beginning, authenticity is one of my highest values. And for me to be authentic, another way of saying that is, am I in alignment? Is what I think, what I say, and what I do all in alignment? And here I am saying I'm a spiritual being having a human experience. Here I am saying I'm an individuation of divinity. Now, I didn't use those words back then when I was younger, but from that headspace, if that's really true, and if that's what I believe in my core, then they're also an individuation of a divinity, and they're going to make the decisions that they're going to make. And if something did happen to their body, it is what it is, and I can love them through that. But forcing them and coming from that fearful place only made me worse. It only made me suffer. It only made me feel negative. And so once I let that go and I shifted more to a place of what I would consider to be true love, an unconditional loving space, now there's no forcing, there's no manipulation, there's no you need to do any of this. This is an option that's worked for me. It may or may not be the right thing for you, but if you want to try it out, here's how you do it. And if not, I love you just as much, and you do you. And that shifted a lot, when I came from that space of not trying to force anymore.
That's a beautiful point. Thank you for bringing that up. I have the wonderful fortune of working with Rhonda Britton, life coach. And one of the things that she talks about is expectations lead to disappointment. And that resonated with me while you were speaking about that, because it is the expectation that, if I know this and I'm working this, then you should be, you should be, those shoulds. As many people that I've encountered over the last year, many coaches, it's you don't want to shit all over the place.
Yeah. I was just telling actually one of my clients yesterday, and this goes beautifully with what you just said. Your next level of breakthrough will never come from more judgment. It will only come from more, or a higher degree rather, of self-compassion, self-love, and self-forgiveness. But that also applies to your next breakthrough with other people. And so if there's other people in your life, and like me, when I was doing that before, if you're coming from that space of hidden judgment, like you think it's love, but it's like really judgment. When you're coming from that space of judgment, you're thinking that your way is the right way and that they're wrong somehow for not doing what you think they should be doing. But what if you just did that yourself? And what if you be the change you want to see in the world? What if you be the role model for what you believe is the way, and see how how it works for you? And even if it works brilliantly for you, that doesn't mean it would work just as great for them.
Right.
And so what if you offer it to them? Hey, this is available as a choice you could make, but you let go of the expectation or the attachment to them actually choosing it. And you let go of the stories of what it would mean if they didn't. Because I had so many stories around, because you're not listening to me, that means, and then I create a whole negative loop in my head. None of that's true. It's all stuff I'm making up.
The stories.
But of course, like, you feel it because that's where your focus goes. And so for anyone listening, if you've got someone in your life, whether it be a child, or obviously there's nuances to it with children, but if
Right.
you've got someone in your life that you're, without intending to, being a little bit more controlling than you would like to be, and you're noticing that that attempt to be controlling is creating suffering in you and frustration in you and all these things in you, what if, as an experiment for the next 3 weeks, you stop doing that and you came more from letting them live the life that they choose to live, and then seeing what happens? And I noticed, as just as an N of one from a like science kind of terminology, in my own world, when I backed off and I just focused on me, I'd be speaking to people, and the same people that I used to be trying to push into my way of doing things. Now I backed off and I would say, "Oh wow, they say, how you doing? I slept really well last night. My energy's good. I'm feeling great. All these things are going really good." And they would say, "How about you?" And they go, "Oh, not doing too well." But then like a couple of days in a row of that, and then they would go, "Can I try that supplement?" Or like, "Can I eat this? Like, you think I should do that?" Like, and now they're asking me instead of me forcing it on them, because they're
Right.
seeing it work for me, and then it naturally is arising in them, and as a offshoot of kind of like curiosity of, well, something that he or she's doing is working. Maybe I should try that. People are so much more open when the idea comes from them than when it comes from you.
Yes. Even if it takes a long, long time. And I
Oh
was,
yeah.
it took a long, long time to
Oh yeah.
finally get me to understand the nudges and, the intuitive hits, everything. I was on that slow path, but I'm grateful that I experienced what I did along the way, because I really think it made me appreciate what that looks like now and what I can impart to my clients, what I can impart to the people around me, but from the space of leading and being rather than instructing and advising.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's lock hands and do this together. We can do this, so thank you. Well, this leads me to the next question. So this will be really interesting. When you were young, back in grade school, and they would ask these questions, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Center field for the New York Yankees.
Oh, wow. Really?
Baseball was my life up until I was about 14. or not even about, until I was 14. Baseball was my life. And then I tried out for the baseball team my first year of high school. And it's one of those comedy tragedies where it's like I thought that my tryout went so well. Like, I walked out of there, head held high. I thought I crushed it. And then a couple of days, I think it was like a Friday. And then Monday rolls around and they have the paper, on the bulletin board or whatever. And like,
Yeah.
these are the names of the people who made the cut. And like, I didn't make it. And I was so devastated. And then it changed everything, because a friend of mine ended up saying, "Hey, like, I'm joining the track team. You want to join?" And I'd never ran intentionally, like, in my whole life. And I was like, "All right, let's do it." That ended up being one of the best decisions of my life. And all my closest friends that are at least in New York are
Mhm.
all people that I ran with 17, 16 years ago. Like, the people that just like with hiking, running, it's like, yeah, you might be competing against other people, but you're really competing against yourself, because it's really just you and the clock.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even if there's other people you're racing against, it's you and the clock. And it's like, there's so many lessons that I got from that. Life experiences that changed everything. But without going too much on a tangent, baseball center field for the Yankees is what I wanted to be as a kid.
Wow. That's it. I love that question because
Mm,
it's interesting to see what people's aspirations were, as they were growing up, and then where we end up later in life, and maybe how that actually transitioned us from one phase to another. Um, I know that for me, I wanted to fly jets in the
mm,
military. And unfortunately, my health prevented that from being a reality but it's just that idea. I wanted to be the first woman to fly jets in the military. Turns out I didn't know at the time that I wouldn't have been the first, but
Yeah.
it 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 still was, it was there. And but it's motivating, and it kind of gets back to what we were talking about before when I asked you, who are you as a person? And we're actually prompted to analyze that early in life. And I just, that came up. And then I jumped into judgment, because in 2019, my New Year's resolution was to be just less judgmental.
Mm.
I had no idea how judgmental I was until I made a very conscious effort to be aware of it. And then I started to see, okay, if something started to come up with someone or something, I would stop and ask myself in reverse, in converse,
Yeah.
would you want somebody to think that about you? No. Oh, judgment's showing up.
Yeah.
But then you start to realize judgment shows up in other ways, because the more aware you become, the more you realize that it is smart. It knows and can adapt with you. And I bring this up because this is a little jump that I'm making right now for myself. I'm transforming my judgments. And so what you were talking about really prior to the baseball really prompted that, in terms of judgment.
Yeah.
What does that look like, aside from just, oh, well, I don't like the way that person wears that blue baggy shirt, or how it shows up in other subtle ways, like when somebody is criticizing you and you're being triggered by them, how there is a form of judgment in there.
Mm-hmm.
Not only the fear, there's fear, there's ego, there's all these complexities that are coming in. So right now I'm on this journey of understanding judgment more.
Yeah. Do you mind if I share some perspectives on judgment?
Absolutely.
I think it could serve everyone listening. And so these are just kind of reflections that I've had and things that I've experienced from different mentors over the years. And as I sat with it, I saw, for me at least, how true it is. So as a possibility, all judgment is self-judgment.
Mm.
And when we recognize that which we judge another for, we're judging ourselves for, because we only ever experience projections. We only ever experience that which we are. And so when we're noticing where we're not forgiving, where we're not loving, it's typically where we're not being loving with ourselves. We're judging somebody else because we're judging, we don't let ourselves do that. And so notice that, I think the sentence that you used, I might get a little bit off, but it's something to the extent of somebody criticizes you, and then, you feel, let's say, bad. But there's a middle step that often gets overlooked by so many of us. And for most of my life, myself included, is someone criticizes you, you choose to believe it, then you feel bad. It's not the criticism that does it. It's all because if I say, hey, for everyone listening, assuming you don't have blue hair, if I say your blue hair looks really dumb, you look at me like I got 5 heads, and you say I don't have blue hair. Someone's listening bald right now going, I don't even have hair. Like, what are you talking about? Like there's this, like, what are you talking about? There's no offense. There's like, I'm kind of confused. I'm not angry. I'm not upset. Like, you didn't trigger me at all. But if I said, hey, you're a bad dad, and if you deep down have been like working your butt off, but you realize like you haven't really been present with your kids, and you've got a fear that you're judging yourself for, that you might not be as good of a dad as you want to be, and then I say it, that triggers you because deep down you believe that. And now something outside of you seems to be confirming that. And so now you get defensive and you rebel. No, I'm not. I'm a great dad for all these reasons, right? And that's why we get offended. But that's where I think so much of the forgiving and the work is to be done. that where am I not loving myself as fully as I could? Where am I not accepting myself as I am in my totality, in my qualities, my flaws, my attributes, my all these things that I do in this physical existence? Where am I not loving me fully? And I think that every single time you come from that space of judgment, and when I say you, I don't mean you, I mean anyone listening.
Right.
When you come from that space of judgment, one of my daily declarations that I use is essentially everything that triggers me gives me the opportunity to love myself, love others, and love the world deeper than ever before. My triggers are my greatest spiritual teachers.
Yes.
And when I come from that headspace, every time I get triggered, it's not what's wrong with you, like the person who quote unquote did it to me, right? Or what's wrong with that situation, or what's wrong with the economy, or what's wrong with this Russia-Ukraine thing, or what's wrong with this. Instead of that, it's like, interesting, why did that trigger me? Because somebody else, it didn't trigger. So it can't be the thing. It can't be the person, because that person that you think, I can't stand that person, somebody else loves that person. Somebody else can't wait to be around that person. So it can't be that person. It's got to be you in relation to them. What's the story that you make up about them? What do they trigger? What do they remind you of? What are you not accepting in them that you're not accepting in you? And whenever they're around, it brings that up in you. And because you haven't done the deep work on it, you get triggered. And to me, that's one of the signs of, if you want to call it this, like spiritual progression, let's say, in your life.
Yeah.
When you're coming home to yourself, to who you really are, you don't get triggered as often. And then it happens less and less and less. And the things that used to bother you don't bother you anymore, even though they continue to happen.
Yeah.
Because you can't control anything outside of you. And so going back to kind of what we said earlier, like full circle, the more you're trying to be controlling, the less you're like trusting. The more you're trying to be controlling, the less you're focusing on just, what can I control? What can I do? I can only ever control me. And if I'm getting triggered, it's because of me. One of my mentors has this beautiful line that I read in one of his books. He's a yogi. And he said, if you have a pail and you throw it in a well, and then you pull the pail up, what comes out of what's in the bucket? And someone goes, well, water. And he goes, okay, why? And the person's a little bit confused. And he goes, water comes out because that's what's in the well. Right? So in that same way, if I throw a bucket into you, and when I pull it out, anger and jealousy and all these things come out, did I do that? That was in you, just like the water is in the well. And so it's not my fault that you were triggered. It's what is it that, how are you relating to the situation? What forgiveness has not been done? Like what work is there to be done to free you of these triggers? Because somebody else would not be triggered by this. And people are probably getting this in the context of what I'm saying, but I'm a strong, believer and advocate in the power of, being a creator of your life, of taking ownership, of taking responsibility, and of commitment. And when I say, responsibility, I never mean blame, shame, fault, guilt. I never mean any of those.
Right.
I simply mean, if your life is not the way you'd like it to be, you are able to respond differently. You are able to change it and make it some way that's closer or exactly what you'd like it to be. When we are committed, like, for example, when you say it's my year of less judgment, and I might say, all right, so this is my year of deeper compassion or more understanding. And then with that, I might have a commitment to do that. So I might have a Post-it note, or I might have a phone reminder that goes off like 4 times a day, right? And that's my commitment that, seek to understand before I'm understood. I might have something on there that everyone I meet is fighting a battle I know nothing about. I might have another Post-it note. My way is a way, not the way, right? And I might have all stuff like that. And that's my commitment. So my life follows suit. In that same kind of way, if we're really committed to our own growth, notice that the ego, as a way of kind of deflecting away from the uncomfortable nature of potentially uncomfortable nature, because it's not uncomfortable in and of itself, we make it uncomfortable, but the uncomfortable aspect of diving into yourself and kind of releasing and forgiving like the wounds and forgiving like that stuck energy and releasing the traumas and things of that nature,
Yes.
it can be heavy at times. And for us to release things like that, it requires, compassion and patience and love and forgiveness. And it's not going to happen overnight. And it can take a period of time. And when other people trigger that, rather than take the ownership and the responsibility to say, oh, wow, this is work for me to do, the ego just says, wow, look at that person. Like, and we just point to the situation that's outside of us, like in quotes, and we say, like, that guy needs some help. And then we don't do anything. We say the same. And then we go our whole life like that. And that's how, it seems from my life experience thus far, personally, with people I've worked with, people I know, and even people that are far, further along life than me that have, books and mentors and things of that, they all kind of point to that same thing. That seems to be a recurring theme that so many of us go through in life. Like, it's like, what would happen if that changes? So just like, this actually is good. Just like when you said, what makes you happy? And my first response was me. Well, then I didn't answer it this way, but the second thing is, what makes you sad? Me. What makes you angry? Me. Nothing makes me anything except for me. And when we take that level of ownership over our emotional well-being, changes everything. It makes it where, that's why when you ask me what makes you sad or what makes you angry, I paused, because it's not often that I feel those things because of this perspective. But
Right.
if I forget the perspective in the moment, then I come from that accusatory, oh, you did that, you made me feel this, right? And then, but because of the awareness that I built up as a habit just over time, now, like, somewhat quickly, usually within seconds, but it might be minutes or an hour or something, it'll hit me. It's like, oh yeah, I'm bullshitting myself. Oh yeah, that's not true. Oh yeah, like I'm making it about them. It's really about me. And then, you do the work, and there's so much liberation and freedom that I have found that's experienced. It's almost like, it reminds me of a Nelson Mandela quote, which I'll paraphrase, but something like, he gets released from prison and he said something to the extent of, I made a decision to like forgive all the people that, quote unquote, wronged me or did this to me.
Right.
Because I knew that when I left prison, if I didn't forgive, I'd still be in prison, even though I'm not physically in the four walls. Right. And so in that same kind of way, where can I do the work on myself to liberate myself and to free myself so I can have the peace that only I can give me?
Yes, there is no greater prison than the prison inside our minds.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a darkness that we fortunately have the key.
Yeah. I often tell people, metaphorically, it's as if you're in a prison cell in your mind, and the door is locked, but the key is in your pocket. And you got the little, like, it's like a movie, you have the cup and you're just like hitting the bars going like, somebody please, like, let me out of here. But the key's in your pocket. And then it's like bulging, like you can see it. And then somebody on the outside goes, excuse me, sir, ma'am, like, check your pocket. And you just go, it can't be that easy. And like, no, and you just keep going and you keep like rattling the cage.
Yeah.
Another way of saying it, Rumi, he's a Sufi poet, I think it's like 800 years ago. Love that guy. And he has a quote where he says, why do you remain in prison when the door is wide open? Same kind of idea. The key's in your pocket, the door's open, same thing. It's like, we're only imprisoned by ourselves. We're only imprisoned by even, and one piece of evidence for this, for anyone who's ever heard of or read the book Man's Search for Meaning by a guy named Viktor Frankl, and he was a physician in the Holocaust. He was Jewish and he was in the concentration camps. And you read this book, which is, by all accounts, insane to think that could happen. And like, somebody dealt with this level of trauma and tragedy and like everyday like survival, like, am I going to live today? All this kind of stuff. And I believe it's like his wife and his daughter, they get separated in the beginning and he saw them go to the gas chamber. Like all that heaviness. And yet he was able to find peace in that experience. And he's quoted to have said, between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space lies your ability to choose your response. That the only thing that the Nazis couldn't take away was that ability, that internal, no matter what you do to me, which again could be physically horrendous. I'm not like, putting that down. No
Minimize it.
matter what you do to me, yeah, it can be really traumatic. And at the same time, there is a inner peace. There's a level that nobody can touch except for you, that regardless of what's going on around you, you can find it and you can tap into it. And it can be very difficult and challenging, but it's there. And it starts just by at least tuning in, questioning our own thinking, questioning our own beliefs, forgiving, doing all that kind of work. But yeah, I'll pause there.
Fantastic. Yes. We could actually do many episodes of this nature, because I know I could go on with you. I mean, I love to just ruminate over these different aspects of ourselves and the power that we actually have, and the abilities that we actually have, all of that inner strength, everything that we need is within us. And the paths that we often have to take to try to find that key in our pocket.
Yeah. And if I can share, just from a perspective for anyone who's listening who is potentially triggered by something that I've shared, because it can sometimes be heavy, right? And from that headspace, all I'd like to say is, despite not knowing you personally,
Right.
ego to ego, I love you. And coming from the space that I want to see you shine. I want to see your enthusiasm, right? I want to see that divinity within, and I'd love to see you bring that into the world. And like everyone else in the history of humanity, you have a story and you have challenges and you have hardships and you've had things that have happened to you and they've been terrible and difficult and all these different things. And, in a way, hopefully, there's ways you've grown from it. And hopefully there's maybe some lessons you've learned along the way. Maybe you can be a light unto other people so they don't have to experience some of what you experienced. But ultimately bringing it down to, regardless of what's happened to you, if you're listening to the podcast right now, you're probably okay in this moment. And notice that all that stuff is not happening right now. But going back to why do you remain in prison when the door is wide open? So, and like you said, the greatest prison is the prison of the mind. And another way to put that, it's the prison of living in your past.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you live in your past, the past let you go a long time ago, because the past only exists in memory. It's not real. And so when we come from that headspace of, no, but you don't understand, like this happened to me and this happened to me and that happened and he did that and she said this. And it's like, I get it. You've been through some stuff. I honor that. I respect that. And if you keep telling that old story, you're going to keep getting more of that. You're going to keep feeling into that. Your present moment is going to be filled with that. And if that's what you want, going back to what I said, I'm not trying to be controlling. Going back, if that's what you want, you feel you're free to do that. And if you want peace, if you want happiness, if you want fulfillment, if you want to live this life to the fullest extent you can and really get the juice of it, it may not serve you to hold on to your past in that way. What if we were to use our past and not let it use us? Using our past from the perspective of, what lessons can I take from this so those same traumas don't happen again? And then how can I, but don't let it use me, where I'm now bringing it into the present and it's taking over my now moment. And now I'm really feeling sad and frustrated and depressed and all these things over something that's not happening right now. And that, to me, the mind is so amazingly powerful.
Yes.
That we can convince ourselves to pretty much feel anything. And so again, as a possibility, as an experiment, as an invitation, however you want to take it, what if you came from a space of forgiving everyone who's ever, from your perception, wronged you? Because as difficult as it might sound to accept, everyone is doing what they know how to do, given the thinking that they have in the moment that looks real to them.
Yes.
And when we recognize that if we had the same upbringing as them, if we believed the same things that they believed, if we had the same thoughts that we believed, that's the key, right? It's not a thought, it's just a thought. But if you believe it, it becomes real for you. So, it's like, I remember hearing somebody say, it's like the Nazi soldiers in general thought they were doing the right thing because that's their thought. And so, and then, Jordan Peterson was a clinical psychologist, he is. And I really, enjoy listening to that man. And he's very intellectual. But he has a thought experiment that he did, that he basically said, if I was a Nazi soldier, would I be the soldier that's like going against everything that his whole like country is like kind of believing in? And would I like be the person like harboring the Jews under my house? And he goes, as much as I'd like to believe that, more than likely I'd be probably just like all the other Nazi soldiers, and I would just be doing what I'm told and doing what I believe is the right thing given what they're telling me. And that's an interesting place to come from, because when we come from that space, it's always easy to think we'd be like the hero.
Mhm.
But if we take that pause and go, wow, if I had thought and believed like really dark things, I'm capable of doing all those things.
Mhm.
The only difference is I choose not to. It's not that I'm like different from the Nazi soldier. We're in this experience, we're both humans. That guy's also a individuation of divinity, but he forgets it. And he sees it in this very separate, isolated way that's distorted massively. And it's like, when we can come from that space of compassion and forgiveness, that, hurt people. And somebody's not gonna, I often say, someone who's full of peace and happiness and love, they're not walking around killing people. It's like, the bully at school
Mhm.
is probably the kid that needs the most love. And I don't say that to ever condone bullying. I say that because what makes the bully do that? Well, the bully is probably getting bullied at home by his or her parents or siblings and feels no control over their individual life and feels like, I'm like kind of worthless and meaningless and not important, but oh, look, I happen to be bigger than the other kids, so I can get some degree of status and importance, and people kind of fear me a little bit, and I like that. I get it. All of a sudden, I make a distinction, a separation between people are not their behavior. If people are their behavior, that means people are the problem. And if people are the problem, you can't help them. But if behaviors are the problem, those can be changed.
Yeah.
And when we recognize that you behave however you behave because of what you're thinking and feeling that look real to you, and that applies to every other person who's ever been in your life. And when we recognize that, this compassion comes over us in my experience of, wow, I would probably do the same thing they're doing if I thought what they're thinking and believed it. So now there's forgiveness, there's compassion. We can release and let go of the past. We can love ourselves fully in this moment. And then we just pay attention. Whenever I get triggered, that's another sign for me to work on myself. And the more I do that, the more freedom I find, the more peace I find. And then when I catch myself blaming, pointing the finger, saying it's life or whoever else is doing it to me, the more the awareness builds in us, we say, wow, that's not true. And then we have such a profound shift internally. And I find like that's the work for each of us in our own time to do. And like we said in the beginning of the conversation, people don't have to get this right now. There's a man named Anthony DeMello. He was considered to be like an enlightened Jesuit priest. And he had this great story where he said, I gave up trying to help people because it doesn't work. And the student said to him, well, what do you mean? Like, what do you do now? And the priest said, I show up and I rain. And rain, like RAIN, like it's raining outside. And he goes, what do you mean by that? And he says, well, when the rain happens, if it falls on fertile soil, something grows. And if it falls on dry soil, it becomes fertile for a future rain. Right. And if it falls on a rock, nothing happens. And it's like, I show up and I rain with zero expectation of, oh, that soil should be fertile, but it's not. That rock should be soil. It shouldn't be a rock. Like, that's nothing to do with me. I'm going to show up. I'm going to do what I do, and they'll get what they get. So in that same kind of way, for everyone listening, whether it's you right now, some of you listening are in your rock phase. No judgment to that. I'm saying things and you're like, wow, this guy's out there. And some of you are hearing things and you're going, I could see that, but you're not like open yet, but you'll hear something in like a month or in a year. And what we did now is going to give you the breakthrough then. And some of you are having breakthroughs left and right now. And this is going to be something you go back and listen to 10 times. And
Right.
when we come from that headspace and bringing it to what we said in the beginning, releasing the control that other people in our life are going to get it, whatever it is, in their own time, when they're ready for it. I don't have to give it to them, and they don't have to get it from me. They'll get it from life. They'll get it from somebody else. If they get it from me, they get it from me. Great. But trying to force it is just going to cause misery in me. They're going to go about living their life the same.
Yeah. And something you said that really brings my magic forward is the past and being stuck in the past and coming forward. That's what I do. That's my unique genius. I have that profound history of abuse and neglect, and I found a way to transform my mindset and reclaim my inner strength just through the transformational art process. And it's a way to take all of that that's stuck up here in the head and bring it out, bring it forward, and analyze it in a way and manipulate it that you then become in that choice pattern of empowerment versus disempowerment.
Yeah. And I really want to just acknowledge you, Katana.
Thank you.
It takes so much courage to go through what you went through and to find the light after, and to come from that space. For anyone listening as well, when you've been through so much hardship and so much challenge, the kind of hardship and challenge that most people might not even really understand because they haven't gone through it themselves, for us to be able to come out the other side, and someone like yourself who's using the experience and the lessons and the light that you found to help others along the way, help them out of their darkness. That's such a strong, courageous, admirable thing. And it's so inspiring to me, at least. And so thank you for doing what you do. And yeah.
Thank you. And to put an end to that section, I really love the concept of being the rain.
Yeah.
Bringing the rain or being the rain, either way.
Yeah.
I really like that concept. You're holding the space. Everything else is up to what happens.
Yeah.
So that's beautiful.
And kind of what we said about the three different kind of variations I used as it relates to us right now and the listeners. Some people are hearing it one way, some people are hearing it a different way, and some people are hearing it a different way. But none of that has anything to do with you and I.
Right.
It has to do with where they're at in their life right now as they're listening.
Right.
Because as we experience something, it's filtered through our habits, our conditioned way of being, our beliefs, our thoughts, our identity. It's all filtered through that unconsciously. And so we're going to hear it in a certain way. That's why, you can go to a party or an event or a something and you think, wow, that was such an amazing experience. And then somebody else at the same event goes, well, that sucked. What a waste of my time. How can they have these diametrically opposed experiences? Because it's not the experience, or it's their experience, but it's not the situation, rather. And so it's that same kind of thing. It applies to, each of us. And I think when we expand that awareness, when it's not just me, it's like, wow, that person's doing what they're doing, probably for these reasons. And wow, that person's probably seeing it in this way. It just expands how we show up in the world, how we relate to people. And that compassion, in my experience, just kind of flows effortlessly. You don't have to choose to do it. It naturally arises when you start to see from that higher vantage point.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that. Well, we're going to go ahead and move into the next portion then. Is what is your unique genius?
I think what I have found over the years, especially in my work, I think that's what revealed it to me, working with my clients more than anything. But my unique genius, or my zone of genius, the thing that I think allows me to do what I do effectively, is my willingness to be love. And
Mm,
what I mean by that is love to me is a verb. It's not a noun. And when we say love is a process, love is an action, I could ask you, you just fought with somebody and you're really upset with them. And I say, do you love them? And you say, of course. And then you're upset, right? You, of course. And I say, is what you just did, were you being loving? And then you pause and you go, well, no. It's like, well, there you go. So it's like in that same kind of way, my clients have told me over and over again, it's like the love and the care that I share with them, but it's not like in a in order to kind of fashion. I'm not doing it for a reason. I'm not doing it to get something. It's who I'm being. And you mentioned that earlier, when we just show up and we're not trying to force or coerce, we're like partnering with and leading and, that kind of thing. So in that same kind of way, I think what I've found over the years is just my willingness to love and care at a very, very, I guess you want to call it intense, maybe level, where most people will tell me I've never been cared for or loved to this degree.
yeah.
And when I bring that to it, like it's almost like saying like love is like your spiritual oxygen. And when I bring that and you're the fire, I'm injecting some oxygen into that and the fire takes off, So I think that to me is my superpower. Like I love.
Wow, that's beautiful. Well, we are coming up on the end of our time together today. So I want to kind of get to these last couple things.
Please.
Would you mind sharing with everyone your business, what it is that you do?
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity. And so everything that I do is centered around helping people experience more happiness, peace, and fulfillment en route to creating whatever it is that they want in their life. For me, it's ultimately about creating an extraordinary life without regret. And an extraordinary life to me is a life on your terms. It's not somebody else's version of your life. It's not what your family or society or whatever you quote unquote should be doing. Like all that in my mind is BS. It's like, what do you want to do? What is that authentic enthusiasm that is you? And how can we bring that to the world? What's that thing that you go, I feel like I should be doing this, but I'm not. And there's a lot of thought going on that's creating that, and I'm not. But there's also people who are doing it, but maybe they're not creating the results that they would like to yet. Or there's people who they are doing it and they are creating the results, but they want to do bigger and better, like whatever that would look like for them. So it's kind of like different tiers of it, but I work with people along that full spectrum. And, I love the metaphor of the time machine. People step into my time machine and we go out into the future. And we arrive at a point where we step out and it's like, this is the picture perfect life for you. This is the career, the health, the relationships, the family, the finances, the whatever, all of that's there, the happiness. And you get a good look and you go, wow, all right, this is it. And then we come back to the present moment and I help you make that real faster than you thought possible. And that's what I live for. That's what I love to do.
That's amazing. I love it. I love it. I pictured Mr. Peabody and Sherman
I remember Sherman.
with their Wayback Machine. Yes. How can our listeners, my listeners, get in contact with you?
Yeah. I will take co-ownership. Our listeners sounds
Yes,
great.
It was an intuitive thing. I'm gonna own it. I'm gonna own it. It's our
good.
listeners.
Love it. So first of all, thank you for everyone who tuned in today. I do hope that our conversation, I really enjoyed it. And so I hope that it was enjoyable for everyone else and that there's something that they could take from it, that they could apply to their life and begin getting an immediate result and begin taking them down a path that maybe they're not on yet, or maybe a path that they're already on, but it can get them deeper into that path that they want to go in. And so for anyone who'd like to be in contact, there's a bunch of different ways. When it comes to like content and things of that nature, I have about 400 or 500 videos on social media that I made over the years, as well as different podcasts I've been on, blog posts, things like that. You can get access to all that on my Instagram and Facebook. And my Facebook is just my name, Jamil Sayegh, and my Instagram is my name, but the DR is in front of it. So DR, Jamil, so it's Dr. Jamil Sayegh. And then on my website, which is just jamilsayegh.com, if anyone wants to have a conversation, if there's something going on in your world and you'd like to see if I can be of support, we can book a call on there And then we can see what's going on in your world. What is it that may be holding you back from what it is that you want, and see if it's a good fit for us to move forward together. And if it's not, maybe I can point you in the right direction. And if it is, then we go down that path and we make some magic.
Fantastic. Well, I do have one last question that I like to ask my guests, and
Please.
that is, what is one thing you would say to your 18-year-old self?
Be you.
I like that.
There's a whole book that's behind those two words, but be you.
That's fantastic. Well, Jamil, thank you so much for being here with me today. It has been such an honor, and I'm looking forward to many more conversations with you, and I hope you'll consider coming back and sharing more.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. This is wonderful.
Well, you have a beautiful rest of your day, and I wish the listeners a beautiful rest of their day.
Thank you. Likewise.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Transformational Art with Katana. If you enjoyed the show, please click the like button and share the link to this podcast with your family and friends. To connect with me personally, please send an email to transformationalartwithkatana@gmail.com. Have a beautiful day.